February 20th, 1962. John Glenn becomes the first American in orbit.
Good Lord, ride all the way. Godspeed, John Glenn.
That historic event is quickly approaching its golden anniversary. But what will the papers read some 50 years later?
I don't want to read on February 20th, 2012, that the United States is unable to launch a person into orbit.
Since 2005, a group that includes veteran aerospace leaders has been working hard on a fascinating mission.
America's
launch.
February
20th, 2012.
Craig Russell is no stranger to flight nor to patriotism. He is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, a former Air Force pilot, and a retired airline pilot. In 2005, he started a nonprofit education organization called Americans in Orbit 50 Years.
The three aspects of our program are inspiration to inspire future generations space explorers, commemoration to commemorate the first U.S. manned orbital flight, the Friendship 7, piloted by John Glenn, and education, so universities can once again launch student payloads into orbit.
Here's how it works. In a nutshell, they're going back to the future. They plan to rebuild and improve not the one-seat Mercury capsule flown by John Glenn, but rather the next generation, the more versatile and robust two-seater Gemini spacecraft.
Well, in fact, it's flown 10 times, and it was crewed by U.S. astronauts in the early 60s, and it's considered to be one of the safest spacecraft ever designed.
AIO-50 has obtained the original NASA plans for the spacecraft.
Americans in Orbit 50 Years has a head start because the research and development that was done by the NASA engineers back in the 60s has already been completed. So we can actually build the spacecraft in a very short period of time.
If this grassroots effort obtains the private financial support it needs, it will not only rebuild this proven workhorse of a spacecraft, it will make it better and reusable for a series of missions. It will be called the Gemini IR, Improved Reusable. It will use a deployable wing and land on a runway, and not in the ocean, as was done in the 60s. It will be outfitted with modern electronics, including GPS. A deployable module will be added to house student experiments. The goal is to launch the Gemini IR on its maiden voyage atop a commercially available booster from Cape Canaveral on February 20th, 2012. 50 years to the day after America first entered orbit. Who will fly the maiden voyage? Meet the astronaut crew. Commander Howard Chipman, jet pilot and emergency room physician, and pilot Veronique Balsa-Kokin, math and aerospace educator.
Our objectives are, number one, to fly into orbit and come back safely. And our second objective is to do the experiments that are going to be designed by the students.
During this maiden flight, we will be taking up to 10,000 pounds of space science experiments from students around the world. Later on, during another flight, one of those students will be selected to go up in orbit with the experiments.
Their mission will last up to 3 days.
During that time, I will be in charge of communicating to Earth about the experiments and also exchanging communications with students themselves.
They are currently in extensive training flying this L-39 jet at their home base in St. Petersburg, Florida.
This is an excellent plane. It's challenging to fly, but doesn't have any bad habits. We can simulate a number of different maneuvers in this aircraft, and we fly it on a weekly basis as part of our training program.
They also train in simulators, which are housed in this mobile command center. Like all astronauts before them, they also regularly train in aircraft specially outfitted for zero-gravity maneuvers. And they conduct media appearances to get the word out, in this case, with Veronique's two sons.
So what do you think your mom going into space?
I'm very proud of her. I think it's going to be awesome.
What do you think? Same?
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
And here's an interesting side note.
I was born on August 27th, 1962.
I was born on August 27, 1962. To me, it represents the connection with the project itself because I was born the same year that we're commemorating as a 50-year anniversary of John Glenn's first orbital flight.
John Glenn is an inspiration to us, so we want to honor and commemorate his flight with our flight.
And even before the flight, AIO 50's mission to inspire students is already well underway. These engineering students were part of a team that built a 1/3 scale flight test vehicle, which will be used for future approach and landing tests. Heather Pitts researched the deployable wing. Tashanka Walker studied the landing gear. Their work took them to the world's largest space conference.
We actually got to go to a conference in Prague, and we got to present our research that we did in the conference.
Well, personally, it inspired me to look above the horizons and to see what opportunities there are for students like myself. This is an opportunity to have your hands involved in something that's tangible, that will hopefully make a mark or leave a mark for others to follow. That's what Americans in over 50 years has done for me.
I don't want to read on February 20th, 2012 that the United States is unable to launch a person into orbit. If we don't do this, that's what the newspapers around the world will read, I'm afraid.
You can help. Join Americans in Orbit 50 years. Your tax-deductible donation will go so far in launching this noble enterprise. Find out more at AIO50.org. Take pride in knowing that you helped make it happen and that you are part of this team.
Americans
In orbit.
50 years.